The pregnancy test was fake, the ultrasounds were edited photos, and the $42,000 is already on its way to Costa Rica with my real soulmate. Thanks for funding our dream life together. The text arrived while I was installing custom cabinetry in a client's kitchen in Boulder. The same steady hands that had built furniture for hundreds of families now trembling as I read those words twice. Then I saw the bank screenshots attached. Our joint savings account showing zero, $42,000, gone. My name's Donovan. I'm 38, been a custom furniture maker and restoration specialist here in Colorado for 12 years. I work with my hands, trust my instincts, and I've learned to spot when wood has been compromised long before it breaks. Turns out I should have applied that same skill to my marriage. Celeste was supposed to be at a specialized prenatal yoga retreat in Sedona, something about preparing her body and spirit for our first child. She'd been 3 months pregnant, or so she'd told me. I'd paid for the retreat naturally, same way I'd paid for the organic prenatal vitamins, the doula consultations, the specialized pregnancy massages, and the organic meal delivery service she suddenly needed. Everything had changed after my grandfather passed 2 months ago. Grandpa Ezra had been a master woodworker, owned a furniture shop in downtown Boulder for 40 years before retiring. He'd left me his entire workshop, his tools, and a cash inheritance that represented a lifetime of craftsmanship and careful saving. Not a fortune by some standards, but it meant everything to me. His legacy, his tools, his way of ensuring I could expand my business and maybe start that family furniture line we'd always talked about. Celeste had been different since the will reading. More distant, more secretive, suddenly obsessed with preparing financially for our growing family. She'd pushed hard for complete transparency in our finances, wanted access to everything so we could plan together as parents. Said it was irresponsible to keep money separate when we had a baby coming. I'd suspected something was wrong when she'd hugged me goodbye at the airport. Too tight, too long, like she was memorizing the moment. Her eyes had been strange, almost guilty. Now I knew why. The woman I'd been ready to build a life with had built an elaborate lie instead. Working with wood teaches you patience, precision, and how to read the grain before you make your first cut. One wrong move with expensive hardwood and you've ruined months of work. It's why I've built my reputation in Boulder on careful assessment and meticulous planning. Custom furniture isn't just about craftsmanship. It's about understanding what people really need versus what they think they want. I've been in this business since I was 26, learned everything from my grandfather Ezra before he retired. Started in his shop sweeping sawdust, graduated to sanding, then joinery, then full custom pieces. By 30, I'd taken over most of the operations. By 35, I'd bought him out and expanded into restoration work for Denver's historic homes. The work requires you to see problems before they become catastrophic failures, a skill that apparently didn't transfer to my personal life. My workshop sits on 3 acres outside Boulder, a mixture of Grandpa's original building and my additions. Climate-controlled storage for rare woods, a spray booth for finishing, and tools that range from antique hand planes to modern CNC machines. Every piece of equipment tells a story, has a purpose, represents years of building something meaningful. Celeste had always seemed impressed by the workshop, the business, the steady stream of wealthy clients who'd pay premium prices for custom work. She'd met me at a farmer's market where I was selling small pieces, cutting boards, jewelry boxes, simple stuff to supplement the big commissions. She was working at an art gallery then, said she appreciated craftsmanship, understood the value of things made by hand rather than machines. The first 2 years were solid. She'd bring lunch to the workshop sometimes, would run her hands over wood pieces and ask intelligent questions about joinery techniques and wood selection. Said she loved watching me work, loved seeing something beautiful emerge from raw materials. We'd talk about expanding the business, maybe opening a showroom in downtown Boulder, building furniture for our future home. But something had shifted after we hit the 3-year mark. She'd started spending more time away from the workshop, claimed the wood dust was bothering her allergies, started talking about feeling unfulfilled, wanting to explore other interests. The gallery work wasn't satisfying her anymore, she said. She needed something more meaningful, more spiritually connected. That's when Kai entered the picture. Kai Nakamura, was Celeste's ex from college, the one she'd described as spiritually immature when we first got together. According to her stories, he'd been all meditation retreats and ayahuasca ceremonies, but couldn't hold down a job or commit to anything real. She'd painted him as a cautionary tale about choosing stability over passion, wisdom over wanderlust. Then suddenly, 3 years into our relationship, Kai was back in her life. He'd evolved, she said, found his calling as a wellness consultant, was traveling the world helping people discover their authentic selves. He'd reached out through social media, was passing through Colorado, wanted to catch up as old friends. I'd been working on a commission dining set for a tech executive in Aspen when she mentioned having coffee with him. No big deal, she said, just curiosity about how he'd changed. But something in her energy shifted after that coffee. She became more restless, started questioning our life together, talking about feeling trapped by conventional expectations. Kai's influence was subtle at first. Celeste started doing yoga, became interested in meditation, began following Instagram accounts about conscious living and spiritual awakening. She'd share posts about breaking free from limiting beliefs, about following your bliss regardless of societal pressures. I'd supported it initially, thought personal growth was healthy, that exploring spirituality might bring us closer together. But the changes accelerated after my grandfather's diagnosis 6 months ago. While I was spending weekends at his bedside, helping him organize 40 years of business records and learning his techniques before it was too late, Celeste was diving deeper into wellness culture. She'd started attending workshops, talking about toxic energy and spiritual blocks, suggesting that my grief was affecting her own vibration. Kai had become a regular presence by then, calling himself her spiritual mentor. He'd started visiting when I was at the shop, offering guidance about her journey toward authentic living. Celeste would mention their conversations casually, how he was helping her understand patterns in her life, how he could see spiritual truths that others missed. When Grandpa passed 2 months ago, leaving me his workshop, his tools, and $70,000 in savings, Celeste's spiritual journey suddenly developed a very practical focus. She wanted to understand our finances completely, said conscious couples shared everything transparently, that spiritual partnerships required absolute trust and openness about resources. I should have seen the pattern. In woodworking, when multiple joints start failing simultaneously, it's usually because the foundation was compromised from the beginning. My grandfather had noticed the changes in Celeste before I did. During one of our last conversations, while I was helping him catalog his hand tool collection, he'd looked up from an antique mortise chisel and said something that stuck with me. That girl's measuring things differently now, Donovan. Used to ask about your work, your techniques, your passion. Now she asks about your business, your clients, your money. Wood doesn't lie about its grain, and people don't lie about theirs either. You just have to know how to read the signs. I defended her then, said she was just trying to be more involved in our future planning, that wanting financial transparency was healthy in a relationship. Grandpa had just nodded and gone back to his tools, but I caught him watching her differently during her visits after that. The pregnancy announcement came 3 weeks after the will reading. Celeste had been acting strange for days. Secretive phone calls, sudden mood swings, claims of feeling nauseous that seemed more performative than physical. When she finally told me, holding a pregnancy test with hands that were shaking for reasons I couldn't identify, something felt off. Not the pregnancy itself. We'd been trying for a year, but her reaction was wrong. Instead of joy or even nervous excitement, she seemed almost relieved, like she'd solved a problem rather than created a life. She immediately started talking about preparing financially, about making sure we had resources for the baby's future, about how my grandfather's inheritance was a sign from the universe that we were meant to start our family now. The requests for financial access intensified after that. She wanted joint accounts for everything, said modern couples didn't keep separate finances when they were building a family together. Made it sound romantic, like some deeper level of partnership and trust. When I hesitated, she'd get emotional, would cry about feeling excluded from major decisions, would worry aloud about what would happen to her and the baby if something happened to me. Kai's presence became more frequent during this time, too. He was helping her navigate the spiritual aspects of pregnancy, she said, supporting her through the emotional transformation of becoming a mother, teaching her meditation techniques for connecting with the baby's energy. Looking back, I realize I was so focused on preparing for fatherhood, so busy processing my grandfather's death and managing his estate, that I missed the coordination happening right in front of me. The way their visits coincided with my biggest commissions, when I'd be locked in the workshop for 12-hour days. The way her pregnancy symptoms seemed to flare up whenever I asked specific questions about doctor visits or ultrasound appointments. The morning she left for Sedona, Celeste had seemed different. Nervous, but not in the way pregnant women usually are before travel. She kept checking her phone, kept touching her still flat stomach in a way that felt practiced rather than instinctive. When I offered to drive her to the airport, she insisted on taking an Uber, said she needed time to mentally prepare for the spiritual aspects of the retreat. Her kiss goodbye lasted too long, felt too final. She held my face in her hands and said, "I want you to know that everything I'm doing is because I love our future together." Strange wording, but I'd attributed it to pregnancy hormones and travel anxiety. The text arrived 2 days later while I was working on a custom credenza for a Denver law firm. My phone buzzed against the workbench, and I almost ignored it. I was in the middle of a delicate inlay pattern that required complete focus. But something made me check. Baby was never real, but the money you gave me is heading to Costa Rica with Kai for our new life. Prenatal yoga was just code for planning our escape. I read it 3 times before the words connected. Then I saw the screenshots. Our joint savings account showing a 0 balance. The $42,000 I transferred there after she'd pushed so hard for shared finances, gone. Money that was supposed to secure our family's future, supposed to help us expand the business, supposed to honor my grandfather's legacy of building something lasting. But it was the baby was never real part that hit hardest. 3 months of planning, of rearranging the workshop to be safer for a pregnant woman, of researching cribs and car seats and college funds. 3 months of imagining my grandfather's tools being passed down to another generation. 3 months of believing I was going to be a father. I set down my chisel and walked outside to the wood storage shed. Not because I needed anything, but because I needed space to process what had just happened. The mountain air was crisp, clean, honest in a way that apparently nothing else in my life had been. My phone buzzed again. Another message from her. "I know you're hurt, but this is who I really am. Kai sees the real me in ways you never could. We're finally free to live authentically." I typed back 4 words. Understood. Safe travels. Then I put the phone in my pocket and went back to work, because there was nothing else to say. And the credenza wasn't going to finish itself. The thing about working with expensive hardwood is that you never start a project without understanding exactly what you're risking. One mistake with a piece of Brazilian rosewood can cost thousands of dollars and months of work. That's why experienced woodworkers always buy extra material, always have backup plans, always test cuts on practice pieces before touching the final stock. I'd learned this principle from my grandfather, but it applied to more than just furniture making. When Celeste had pushed so hard for complete financial transparency after the inheritance, something in my craftsman's instinct had warned me to be careful. Not suspicious exactly, but careful the way you're careful when working with unfamiliar wood grain. So I'd given her what she wanted, access to our joint savings account, but I'd done it strategically. The $42,000 she'd taken represented exactly what I'd calculated someone might steal if they were planning to disappear but didn't want to trigger immediate legal action. Significant enough to feel like a victory, small enough that losing it wouldn't destroy me if things went wrong. My grandfather had been more than just a craftsman. He'd been a businessman who understood that people sometimes revealed their true nature when they thought no one was watching. He'd taught me about backup plans, about protecting your tools and your materials from people who might not value them the way you do. The real inheritance, the remaining $28,000 in cash, plus the workshop property and tool collection worth another $150,000, had never touched any account Celeste could access. I'd immediately placed it in a business trust through my attorney, structured as expansion capital for the furniture business, completely legal, completely protected, completely invisible to anyone who didn't know where to look. The pregnancy had actually made my decision easier. When someone claims to be carrying your child and then immediately starts demanding access to your life savings, that's not love talking. That's calculation. I'd given her the bait money and waited to see what she'd do with it. She'd failed the test spectacularly, but she had no idea she was being tested. As far as she knew, she'd just stolen my grandfather's entire legacy and left me financially devastated. The reality was that she'd taken exactly what I'd been willing to lose to learn her true character. The lesson was expensive but invaluable, and unlike my grandfather's tools, it was one I'd never forget. That evening, I did something I'd been putting off since Celeste left. I opened the safe in my workshop office and pulled out the real documentation. Bank statements showing the business trust account with its steady balance, the property deed for the workshop and 3 acres, transferred into the business name, the insurance appraisal for my grandfather's tool collection, valued at more than most people make in 2 years. Everything she thought she'd stolen had been just the tip of the iceberg. The joint savings account had been my canary in the coal mine. If it disappeared, I'd know exactly who had taken it and why. If it stayed untouched, I could eventually have trusted her with the rest. Simple test, clear results. I'd learned this approach from restoring antique furniture. Before you invest time and resources in a major restoration, you test small hidden areas first. You see how the wood responds to different treatments, whether the joints will hold, whether the piece is worth saving. If the test areas fail, you've only lost a small amount of time and materials. If they succeed, you move forward with confidence. Celeste had failed every test without realizing she was being tested. The sudden interest in finances after never caring before. The pregnancy announcement that coincided perfectly with inheritance timing. The spiritual mentor who happened to be an ex-boyfriend. The urgent need for complete financial access based on vague future planning. Each red flag had been another test cut, another way to assess whether she was solid material or had hidden defects that would show up under pressure. She'd failed them all, but I'd let her fail safely, with minimal risk to what actually mattered. The business trust was structured ironically around family legacy preservation, something my attorney had suggested when we were discussing my grandfather's wishes for the workshop. The tools and property would stay together, would continue supporting furniture making, would eventually pass to someone who valued craftsmanship over quick cash. It was protection against exactly the kind of situation I was now facing. My grandfather would have approved. He'd always said that the best way to protect something valuable was to make sure the wrong people never knew it existed in the first place. Celeste had thought she was stealing my future. Instead, she'd simply revealed that she was never going to be part of it. The real future was still intact, still growing, still mine to build however I chose. The call came 5 days later while I was applying the final coat of Danish oil to the credenza. Celeste's voice, but different, strained, uncertain. "Donovan, we need to talk. I know you're angry, but there are legal things we need to discuss." I kept working while I spoke, focusing on smooth, even strokes with the brush. "What kind of legal things?" "Kai's lawyer says we need to formalize our separation properly. And before you get any ideas about being vindictive, what I did was completely legal. We had joint accounts, remember? You gave me access." "I remember." "Good. So let's handle this like adults. I'll file no fault. We'll split the remaining assets 50-50, and we can both move forward with our lives." I set down my brush and paid attention. "Remaining assets? Don't play stupid, Donovan. I know there's more money than what was in our savings account. Your grandfather worked for 40 years and owned that workshop. There has to be hundreds of thousands somewhere." "You think there's more money?" "I know there is, and Kai's lawyer knows how to find hidden assets. You can't just hide wealth during a divorce proceeding. Everything has to be disclosed." I almost smiled. "You should definitely have your lawyer look into that." Something in my tone must have registered because she went quiet for a moment. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. Just that you should absolutely have your lawyer do a thorough investigation. I want everything to be transparent." "Donovan, you're scaring me a little. You're being too calm about this. Why aren't you upset that I took the money?" "Why would I be upset? You said this is what's best for both of us." "It is, but look, I know this hurts. I know you thought we were building something together, But sometimes people grow apart, and when they do, it's better to be honest about it. I agree completely. Honesty is important. Then why do I feel like you're hiding something? I'm not hiding anything, Celeste. I hope your lawyer finds everything he's looking for. There was a long pause. I want to meet with you and your attorney next week. We can settle this quickly if you cooperate. I don't have an attorney yet. Well, get one. And Donovan, don't try to hide assets. Kai's lawyer specializes in high-asset divorces. He'll find everything. I'm counting on it, I said, and hung up. The meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday at a downtown Boulder law office. I showed up alone, carrying a leather portfolio my grandfather had used for important business documents. The kind of thing that suggested preparation, but not necessarily the kind they expected. Kai's lawyer was a sharp-dressed man named Richardson, who clearly specialized in extracting maximum value from divorces. Celeste sat beside Kai. Apparently, he'd flown back from Costa Rica for this meeting, which told me something about how confident they were about finding more money. Mr. Chen, Richardson said, where's your attorney? Don't have one yet. Figured I'd hear what you have to say first. Richardson and Celeste exchanged glances. This wasn't how these meetings usually went. Kai stayed quiet, but I could see him assessing me, probably wondering if I was as financially naive as they'd assumed. Let's cut to the chase, Richardson continued. We've done preliminary research into your finances, and we know there are significant assets you haven't disclosed. Your grandfather's estate was valued at over $200,000 according to tax records, yet only $42,000 appeared in your joint accounts. Where's the rest? I opened my portfolio and set a thick folder on the table. Right here. Richardson opened it and began reading. Bank statements, trust documents, business incorporation papers, property deeds, insurance appraisals. Everything. His expression changed as he read, going from confident to confused to something approaching concern. Celeste leaned over, trying to see. What is all this? Richardson was quiet for a long time. Finally, he looked up. Mrs. Chen, we need to talk privately. No, Celeste said. Whatever it is, say it here. We agreed on transparency. Richardson glanced at me, then back at her. The money you transferred from the joint account, it wasn't your husband's inheritance. What do you mean? I mean the account you emptied was funded by your husband's personal savings. The inheritance money never touched any account you had access to. Celeste's face went white. That's impossible. I monitored the account activity. I saw when the money was deposited. You saw what your husband allowed you to see. The $42,000 you took was money he deliberately placed in the joint account. The real inheritance is here. He tapped the folder. In accounts and investments you never had access to. The room went very quiet. I watched Celeste process this information, saw the moment it hit her. You set me up, she whispered. No, I said calmly. I protected myself. There's a difference. Richardson was reading something else now, a document from the bottom of the folder. Mrs. Chen, there's something else. Your marriage contract includes a clause about fraudulent claims and asset transfer without proper disclosure. We don't have a prenup, Celeste said quickly. Actually, you do, signed 4 years ago. Your husband's copy is notarized and witnessed. He showed her the document. I watched her read it, watched her remember signing it. We told her it was insurance paperwork for the workshop property. She'd signed without reading. The clause was simple. Any attempt to defraud or transfer assets based on false claims would result in forfeiture of all claims to marital property. This can't be legal, she said. It's perfectly legal, and the pregnancy fraud you perpetrated falls squarely under this clause. Celeste looked at me with something I'd never seen before. Genuine fear. Donovan, please, we can work this out. I made a mistake. I was confused, overwhelmed. The spiritual work with Kai made me think I wanted something different. But I realize now. I stood up. Keep the money, Celeste. You've earned it. What do you mean? I mean $42,000 is a fair price for finding out who you really are before I wasted more time. I walked toward the door, but she followed me into the hallway. Donovan, wait, please. What about the baby? What if I really was pregnant and just made a mistake about the timing? I stopped and looked at her. Really looked at her. Were you ever pregnant? She couldn't hold my gaze. The tests were inconclusive. Sometimes early pregnancy is hard to detect. That's what I thought. But we could try again. For real this time, start over. I'll give the money back. We'll work on our marriage, build something real together. With Kai, that's over. He helped me realize what I actually wanted. What I actually want is you, our life, our future. I got in my truck and rolled down the window. Celeste, I stopped wanting a future with you the moment I realized you were measuring everything in our life to see what it was worth to someone else. She stood in the parking lot as I drove away, still talking, still trying to negotiate her way back into a life that had already moved on without her. 2 years have passed since that meeting in downtown Boulder. I heard through mutual friends that Celeste and Kai's Costa Rica adventure lasted about 6 months before the money ran out and reality set in. Turns out spiritual enlightenment is expensive, and $42,000 doesn't go as far as it used to, especially when you're supporting 2 people who've never learned to live within their means. She moved back to Denver, works at a different gallery now, lives in a studio apartment and drives a used Honda. Kai disappeared back into the wellness circuit, probably running the same spiritual mentor routine on someone else who's looking for meaning in all the wrong places. I kept the workshop, expanded it actually, used part of the inheritance to build a proper showroom, hired 2 apprentices, and started the family furniture line my grandfather and I had always talked about. Turns out there's a strong market for heirloom quality pieces made by people who understand the difference between price and value. Started dating again recently too. Met a woman named Isabel at a woodworking class I teach at the community college. She's a nurse, divorced, has a teenage daughter who's actually interested in learning traditional joinery techniques. Isabel knows about Celeste, knows about the whole situation, says she's impressed that I protected myself, but more impressed that I didn't let it make me bitter. We take things slow, keep our finances separate, and she actually laughs when I explain my test small before you risk everything approach to relationships. Says it makes sense from someone who works with materials that can't be fixed once they're broken. Sometimes I wonder if I could have saved my marriage by being more trusting, more open, more willing to take emotional risks. But then I remember that text message, the casual cruelty of it, the months of planning that must have gone into her deception, and I know the truth. Some people are worth the risk, and some people aren't. The trick is learning to tell the difference before it costs you everything that matters. My grandfather taught me to read wood grain, to spot defects before they became failures. Turns out that skill applies to more than just furniture. Learning that lesson was worth every penny of the $42,000. Some education is expensive, but ignorance costs more.